Good morning. Many of us, either through Watchtower's bad actions or life in general, have either lost our health, our homes, or our families, or maybe all three. Therefore, at times it's understandable that we would be bitter. Consequently, we can identify with the story of Naomi. Now, this might be very familiar to us, but it has a happy ending, so I'd like to go over it. Naomi lived in Bethlehem with her husband and her 2 sons, and her husband Elimelech decided that when a famine came, they would move to Moab. Now the Moabites were relatives of the Jews because they were descendants of Lot, Abraham's nephew, and they weren't very friendly to the Jews, but it seems that at this point in history they weren't too bad. So Elimelech and Naomi settle in the land of Moab. Shortly thereafter, Elimelech dies, but Naomi still has her 2 sons, and eventually they married 2 Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. In time, the 2 men die, leaving Naomi bereft. And she's about to lose her daughters-in-law as well, because she encourages them to go back to their families, because it seems that there's no future for them in Israel. Naomi decides to go back home because the famine has ended, and she wants her daughters-in-law to stay in Moab. Ruth, however, refuses to go, and she says these famous words to Naomi: "Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people shall be my people, your God, my God." Ruth had come to know this God of Naomi's through the stories told to her by either her husband or Naomi, and she wanted to stick to Naomi. So they both go home to Bethlehem, and the village is absolutely excited because they haven't seen Naomi for years. But Naomi is despondent, and she says to them, "Don't call me Naomi," which means pleasantness. "Call me Mara," which means bitter. And she says, "Filled full I departed. Yahweh brings me back empty. Why call me Naomi then, since Yahweh has given witness against me?" However, they settle in Naomi's old home, and this is the beginning of the barley harvest. This is about the middle of March. So Ruth goes to glean according to Israelite law, and she happens upon the field of Boaz. Now, when Naomi knows about this, she's quite excited because Boaz is a close relative of Elimelech's, and therefore, according to Israelite law, has the right of repurchase. In the meantime, Boaz is very kind to Ruth and makes sure that she has lunch with the other women in the field and that she's well looked after by the shearers, that they leave things behind in the field for her to glean. And eventually Ruth picks up an ephah of barley, which is a lot. It's about 22 litres worth of barley. Ruth gleans throughout both the barley and the wheat harvest, so she's working in the fields from the middle of March until the end of May. And at this time, Naomi decides that she needs to find Ruth a home. If Naomi dies, Ruth will be left without any family at all in a foreign land. So she says to Ruth, "I want you to go to the threshing floor where you'll find Boaz asleep in the middle of the night." And she says to Ruth, "Uncover his feet." Now, if any of you have tried to sleep with cold feet, you'll understand why it was that Boaz woke up. His feet were freezing. But he finds this woman at his feet, and so he says to her, "Why are you here?" Ruth explains that Naomi has sent her because Boaz has the right of repurchase. But Boaz says there is actually a relative closer than he is, and in the very next morning he calls the elders to him and this near relative and explains the situation. The near relative has the right of repurchase, which he was willing to do until he understands that he has to marry Ruth. Now, the problem with that is that this field that he might have invested in isn't his. It would belong to Ruth's children. So he declines the offer because he might lose his investment. Boaz, however, is agreeable to buying it, and he marries Ruth, and we know that there's a happy ending. The two of them have a child, Obed. Now, the ancestry is quite interesting. Salmon was the father of Boaz by Rahab. So Rahab was the mother of Boaz. So Boaz, when he marries Ruth and they have a child, Obed, this child, Obed, has both Canaanite and Moabite blood in him. But Obed is the grandfather of David and obviously then a descendant of an ancestor of Jesus Christ. If you look at the ancestry list at the beginning of Matthew chapter 1, there are very few women mentioned, Tamar being the mother of Perez, who is an ancestor of Obed, and then both Rachel and Ruth are mentioned until you come to Mary. This means that God is not partial. He welcomes anybody who has faith, whatever nation they belong to. If they have faith in him, he loves them dearly. He loves the Jews, obviously, as descendants of Abraham. But all of us who have faith in this dear Father of ours are very welcome. So we await our happy ending for when the kingdom comes. Thank you so much for listening, and take care, and God bless.